She was banished from his house in tears until the Duke rode back through the night to save her. The rain mingled with her tears as Eleanor Ashford stumbled down the gravel drive, her thin slippers soaked through, her belongings scattered behind her like the wreckage of a life. The Duke of Thornwood's words still burned in her ears. "You disgust me. Leave my sight and never return," spoken with such venom that she had felt her heart crack like porcelain dropped on marble. She had come to Thornwood Manor as a governess, yes, but also as the secret ward of his late mother, carrying a letter she was never meant to read, a truth she was never meant to know. And now, 6 months after burying that letter in the garden at midnight, she was being cast out into the storm, branded a thief by the very man whose childhood she had once shared, whose first kiss she had stolen behind the rose arbor when they were both too young to understand the chasm that wealth and title would carve between them. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The gates of Thornwood loomed behind her, iron and unforgiving, and Eleanor Ashford did not look back. She could not. To look back would be to shatter completely, and she needed what remained of her composure to make it to the village before nightfall. The accusations had come swift and brutal. A ruby brooch missing from the late Duchess's collection, found, impossibly, tucked into the lining of Eleanor's worn trunk. She had sworn her innocence until her voice grew hoarse, had pleaded with eyes that once made Adrian Blackwood smile. But the man who stood before her in the library was not the boy who had taught her to climb trees and steal pastries from the kitchen. He was the Duke now, cold, impenetrable, haunted. "My mother trusted you," he had said, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. "She brought you into this house, educated you alongside me, treated you as—" He had stopped then, the unspoken words hanging between them like smoke. As family, as equal, as beloved. But Eleanor was not family. She was the daughter of a disgraced scholar, taken in by the Duchess out of charity, or so the story went. The letter buried in the garden told a different tale, one written in the Duchess's own hand, one that began with the words, "Adrian must never know that Eleanor is his half-sister." The rain fell harder now, turning the road to mud. Eleanor's bonnet hung useless around her neck, her dark hair plastered to her face. She had made it perhaps a mile from the estate when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her, fast and reckless. She did not turn. It would be a servant sent to ensure she truly left, or perhaps the constable coming to question her further about the brooch she had never touched. The horse drew alongside her, and a hand reached down, gloved, strong, achingly familiar. "Get on." Adrian's voice cut through the storm. Eleanor stopped walking, but did not look up. "Have you come to drag me back for public humiliation, or shall I be sent to the magistrate after all? Eleanor." The way he said her name made her chest ache. It was not the voice of the Duke who had condemned her. It was the voice of the boy who had once promised to build her a library that touched the sky. Please. She finally looked up, and what she saw stole her breath. His face was ravaged, not with anger now, but with something worse, anguish, the kind that came from a truth too terrible to name. "I found the letter," he said quietly, "the one my mother wrote, the one you buried by the white roses." His eyes, gray as the storm clouds above, held hers with desperate intensity. "Eleanor, tell me it is not true." "Tell me you are not." "I am," she whispered, and the confession felt like dying. "I am your father's daughter, born before he married your mother, to a woman he loved but could not wed. Your mother knew. She protected me. She made me promise never to tell you." Adrian's hand remained extended, rain streaming down his arm. "Then you knew. All these years you knew we shared blood, and you let me." His voice cracked. "That day by the river, when I kissed you, when I told you I would defy every law of propriety to make you my wife, you knew, and you said nothing." The memory of that afternoon 3 years ago bloomed between them, painful and beautiful. She had been 18, he 22. He had been home from university, full of dreams and rebellion, and she had been so foolishly in love that she had almost forgotten the letter she had discovered in the Butchesses' private papers, almost told him yes, almost destroyed them both. "I said nothing because I loved you," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "And because your mother begged me, in that letter, to let you go, to let you marry well, to preserve the Thornwood name, to never burden you with the scandal of your father's betrayal." Adrian's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he dismounted, standing before her in the pouring rain, and Eleanor saw that he was shaking. "The brooch," he said. "My cousin Robert planted it in your trunk. I found him in the study, counting banknotes. He confessed everything when I held him against the wall. He owes debts, gambling debts, and thought to discredit you, to have you dismissed so he might search for my mother's jewels without your interference." Eleanor felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Then you know I am innocent." "I knew the moment I said those words to you that I was wrong," Adrian said, his voice raw. "I saw your face, Eleanor. I have known your face my entire life. You could no more steal than you could stop breathing." "But I was." He closed his eyes. "I was afraid." "Afraid?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "You banished me into a storm, called me a thief before the entire household, and you claim you were afraid?" "Of what I feel for you," he said, opening his eyes, and the naked vulnerability there nearly broke her. "Of what I have always felt for you, even when I told myself it was merely brotherhood, merely friendship. When Robert accused you, when I saw that brooch in your trunk, I seized upon it like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. I thought—" his voice dropped to barely a whisper, "I thought if I could make myself hate you, I could finally be free of this wanting." Eleanor felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "And now you know why that wanting is impossible, why I pushed you away 3 years ago. Why I refused your letters, your visits, your every attempt to court me. We are brother and sister, Adrian. The law may not know it, but God does, and we do, and that is enough." "Is it?" He stepped closer, so close she could see the water droplets caught in his dark lashes. "Is it enough to condemn us both to lives of pretense? You would have me marry some simpering heiress while you waste away as a governess in some distant house, and we would both call it duty?" "Yes," she said, though the word felt like swallowing glass. "Because there is no other way. There is always another way." Adrian's hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching, as if even now he feared crossing that final boundary. "Come back to the house. You are soaked through, and night is falling. Let me at least offer you shelter. Until what?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "Until the scandal of your father's bastard daughter living under your roof reaches London? Until someone discovers the truth your mother died protecting? I cannot, Adrian. For your sake, I cannot." "Then do it for your own sake," he said. And now his hand did touch her face, gentle as a prayer. "Do it because you are freezing and alone, and the nearest village is still 3 miles distant. Do it because, blood or no blood, you are the person I trust most in this world, and I will not let you disappear into the night believing I think you a thief." Eleanor wanted to resist. Every rational thought in her mind screamed that she should pull away, should continue walking, should put as much distance between herself and Thornwood Manor as possible. But her body betrayed her, leaning into the warmth of his palm, and she found herself nodding. "One night," she whispered, "only until the rain stops. Then I leave at first light, and you let me go." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Triumph or sorrow? She could not tell. "One night," he agreed, though the words sounded like a lie even as he spoke them. He helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her, and Eleanor tried not to notice how perfectly she still fit against him, how her body remembered the shape of his even after 3 years of forced distance. They rode back toward Thornwood in silence, the great house rising before them like a Gothic reproach, its windows glowing golden against the dark. The servants who had witnessed her humiliation now witnessed her return, their faces carefully blank as Adrian carried her, for she had twisted her ankle in her flight and could barely walk, through the grand entrance and up the marble stairs. He took her not to the governess quarters where she had lived these past months, but to the east wing, to the suite of rooms that had belonged to his mother. "These are yours now," he said, setting her gently on the velvet chaise near the fire that a quick-thinking maid had already lit. "Everything in them. My mother would have wanted you to have them." "Adrian, I cannot." "You can." His voice was firm. "You will stay here tonight, in comfort and safety, and tomorrow we will decide what is to be done. But I will not have you sleeping in some cold garret while you are under my protection." Eleanor looked around at the familiar room, the place where she had spent countless afternoons reading aloud to the Duchess in her final illness, where she had held the dying woman's hand and promised to keep her secret. "She loved you so much," Eleanor said softly. "She made me swear I would never hurt you with the truth. And instead, the truth found us anyway." Adrian knelt before her, his hands careful as he removed her ruined slippers. "Let me send for hot water and dry clothes. You are shivering." "You should not be doing this," Eleanor protested weakly. "A duke does not attend to—" "To his sister?" The word fell between them like a stone into still water. "Is that what you are, Eleanor? Is that all you are?" She looked down at his bent head, at the dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, still damp from the rain. "It is what I must be." He lifted his face to hers, and in his eyes she saw the same desperate conflict that tore at her own heart. "And if I do not wish to accept that, if I rage against it with every breath in my body—" "Then you are a fool," she said gently, reaching down to touch his hair, just once, a farewell written in the gesture. "And I have always known you to be wise." Adrian caught her hand, pressed it to his lips, not a kiss of passion, but something deeper, something that felt like breaking. "Stay," he said, "not just tonight. Stay at Thornwood, not as a governess, as—" he faltered, "as family, as the sister I never knew I had. Let me know you, Eleanor. Let me be your brother in truth, not in secret." The offer was so tempting, it hurt. To remain here in the house she loved, near the person she loved most in the world, even if it could never be in the way her heart desired. To have some piece of him rather than nothing at all. But Eleanor had lived 3 years with the weight of their shared blood pressing down on her chest like a stone, had watched Adrian from afar and known that every smile she drew from him was a sin, every conversation a stolen moment. She knew what it would mean to stay, To watch him eventually marry, to see him with children who would call her aunt while never knowing the truth, to grow old in the shadow of a life that could never be hers. "I cannot," she whispered, and the words destroyed something in his face. "Adrian, I cannot watch you live your life while I pretend to be content with the edges of it. It would kill me by inches." "And leaving will not?" His grip on her hand tightened. "Eleanor, where will you go? What will you do? You have no family, but—" He stopped. "No family willing to claim you. No fortune, no references, for I have ruined your reputation with my false accusations." "I will write to Lady Pemberton," Eleanor said, naming one of the Duchess's few confidants, a woman who had always been kind to her. "She may know of a position, somewhere far from here." "Far from me, you mean?" "Yes." Adrian released her hand abruptly, rising to pace before the fire. Eleanor watched the play of firelight across his features, the strong nose inherited from his father, the sensitive mouth that was all his mother, the eyes that held storms. How many times had she memorized this face, knowing she had no right to love it as she did? "There is another way," Adrian said finally, turning back to her. "A way that might satisfy both honor and—" he hesitated, "and the demands of our hearts." Eleanor's pulse quickened traitorously. "What way?" "The letter my mother left was addressed to me," he said slowly, "but it was sealed, hidden in a locked box in her private study. Only you and I know its contents. Robert saw me retrieve it, but he did not read it. I made certain of that before I dismissed him from the house." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that the truth of our connection exists only in that letter, in your mother's testimony, which I assume is long lost, and in our own minds." Adrian's eyes held hers. "What if we chose to forget it?" Eleanor felt the room tilt. "Forget that we share a father? Forget the blood between us?" "Not forget," Adrian said, crossing to her again, kneeling once more before her chair, "but choose to define ourselves by what we feel, not by what we cannot change. Eleanor, we were raised together, yes, but not as siblings. We did not know, and the world does not know. If we do not speak of it, if we destroy that letter—" "No," Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Adrian, no, you cannot mean this." "I mean it with every part of my being." His hands caught hers, held them against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. "I have spent 3 years trying to cut you out of my heart. I have courted proper young ladies and attended proper balls and done everything a proper duke should do, and all of it has been ashes in my mouth. Then you returned, and I told myself it was mere friendship, mere nostalgia. But Eleanor," his voice broke, "when I thought you had betrayed me, when I believed the lie Robert planted, I wanted to die from the pain of it, not because you had stolen from me, but because I thought you had become someone I did not know, someone I could not trust. The depth of that pain revealed the truth I have been hiding from even myself. Adrian, we share blood. We share a father who never claimed you, who abandoned your mother, who let you grow up in poverty while his legitimate son lived in luxury." Adrian's voice was fierce now. "We share no childhood memories of siblings, no bond formed in innocence. We are strangers who happen to carry the same blood, and I will not let that accident of birth rob me of the only happiness I have ever known." Eleanor pulled her hands free, rising from the chair, though her ankle protested. She limped to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked gardens where 6 months ago she had buried the Duchess's letter by the white roses. "You do not understand what you are asking. The sin of it." "The sin is in forcing 2 hearts that beat as one to remain forever apart because of something neither of us chose." Adrian came up behind her, so close she could feel the heat of him. "Tell me you do not love me, Eleanor. Tell me that what you feel for me is merely sisterly affection, and I will let you go tomorrow with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your days. But if you cannot tell me that, if you love me as I love you, then I am begging you to stay, to let me court you properly, to become my wife." The word wife hung in the air between them, terrible and beautiful. Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting the surge of longing that threatened to overwhelm her. "The Duchess knew," she said quietly. "She knew, and she made me promise to keep us apart. Are you asking me to break a deathbed vow to the woman who saved my life?" "I am asking you to save our lives," Adrian said. "My mother loved us both, but she was shaped by an older generation, by stricter rules. If she could see us now, see what this secret has done to us." "She would say we must be strong," Eleanor said. "She would say that some loves are not meant to be, and that accepting that is the truest form of courage." "Then I am a coward." Adrian's hands settled on her shoulders, gentle but unmovable. "Because I cannot accept it. I cannot watch you walk away tomorrow knowing I will never see you again, never hear your laugh, never watch you read by the fire while that small crease appears between your brows. I cannot marry some other woman and pretend it is enough. I cannot, Eleanor. I have tried, and I cannot." Eleanor turned in his grasp, looking up at him, and saw her own desperation reflected in his face. "If we do this," she whispered, "there is no return. We could never confess, never tell anyone. We would have to live with the secret forever." "I have already lived with worse secrets," Adrian said. "I have lived with the secret of loving you while pretending I did not. This, at least, would let me love you openly, honestly, with all the world as witness." "And the letter? Your mother's confession?" "I will burn it," he said without hesitation. "Tonight, if you wish. We will burn it together, and with it, the last evidence of a truth that has brought us nothing but pain." Eleanor felt tears sliding down her face, hot against her rain-chilled skin. Every moral lesson she had ever learned screamed that this was wrong, that they would be damned for it, that God himself would turn his face from such a union. But beneath that voice was another, older, deeper, the voice of her heart, which had loved this man since before she understood what love meant, which had chosen him again and again, despite every rational reason to let him go. "I am afraid," she confessed, "afraid that God will punish us, afraid that we will be discovered, afraid that you will one day regret this choice and hate me for not being stronger." Adrian's thumb brushed away her tears with infinite gentleness. "I am afraid too," he admitted, "afraid of living without you, afraid of the empty years stretching ahead, filled with duty but no joy, afraid of dying without ever truly having lived. Eleanor, we have one life, one brief, flickering candle of a life, and I do not believe, I cannot believe, that God would light such love in our hearts only to demand we snuff it out. You are trying to rationalize sin." "Perhaps," he smiled sadly. "Or perhaps I am finally seeing clearly for the first time. We did not choose this love, Eleanor. It chose us. Before we knew the truth, before there was any question of impropriety, our souls recognized each other. Is that not evidence of something divine rather than damned?" Eleanor wanted to believe him. Oh, how desperately she wanted to believe. "If we do this," she said slowly, "I need time. Time to think, to pray, to be certain. I will not make such a choice in the heat of a moment." "Then stay," Adrian said. "Stay for a week, a month, whatever you need. Stay as my honored guest, with no pressure, no demands. Let me show you what our life could be like. And at the end of that time, if you still wish to leave, I will provide you with references that would make Queen Victoria herself envious, and enough money to ensure you never want for anything." It was, Eleanor realized, a devil's bargain. Because a week in his presence, a month of being treated as something precious rather than shameful, would only make it harder to leave. But she was so tired of running, so tired of pretending, so tired of being strong. "1 month," she heard herself say. "I will stay for 1 month. But there will be no," she faltered, heat rising to her cheeks. "No intimacy," Adrian finished gently. "I understand. I am asking you to consider marriage, Eleanor, not to compromise yourself. For this month, I will court you as a gentleman should, with respect, with patience, and with every ounce of devotion I possess." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian's hand lifted to her face, cupping her cheek, and for a moment she thought he would kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers, a gesture of tenderness that somehow felt more intimate than a kiss. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving us a chance, for not walking away forever." "I may still walk away at the end of the month," Eleanor warned, though her hands had somehow found their way to his chest, fisting in the damp fabric of his shirt. "I know, and I will let you go, if that is your choice. But Eleanor," he pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, "I will fight for you, for us, with everything I have." A knock at the door broke the moment. A maid entered bearing hot water and a pile of dry clothes, her eyes carefully averted. Adrian stepped back, assuming the role of the proper duke once more, though Eleanor could still see the storm of emotion barely contained behind his formal mask. "See that Miss Ashford has everything she needs," he told the maid. "She is to be treated as an honored guest of the house. Anyone who shows her disrespect will answer to me personally." The maid bobbed a curtsy, her eyes wide. The gossip would spread through the servants' quarters by morning. The governess who had been banished had returned, elevated, transformed. Eleanor could only imagine what stories they would weave. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. "Rest well, Eleanor. Tomorrow, everything changes." When he was gone, Eleanor sank back onto the chaise, her strength finally giving out. The maid fussed around her, helping her out of her sodden clothes and into a warm nightgown, bringing her soup and bread that she could barely taste. Finally alone, Eleanor stared into the fire and tried to understand what she had just agreed to. 1 month. 1 month to decide whether to embrace the greatest sin of her life or to walk away from the only man she had ever loved. God forgive her, she already knew which choice her heart was begging her to make. The month that followed existed outside of normal time, suspended in a space between sin and salvation. Adrian kept his word. He courted Eleanor with every ounce of devotion he possessed, but always, always with perfect propriety. He brought her books from his library and read aloud to her by the fire. He walked with her through the gardens, careful to keep a respectable distance, pointing out the places where they had played as children. He played the pianoforte for her in the music room, coaxing melodies from the keys that made her weep. He talked to her, really talked, in the way they had when they were young, and everything was simple. He told her about the weight of the title he had inherited, the loneliness of responsibility, the constant pressure to be perfect. She told him about the years after her mother's death, living in poverty, the hunger and cold and desperate fear before the Duchess had found her. "I used to pretend you would come rescue me," Eleanor confessed one afternoon as they sat in the conservatory among the orchids. I would tell myself stories where you rode up on a white horse and carried me away to safety. I was 8 years old and desperately, hopelessly in love with you, though I did not have words for it yet. Adrian's smile was bittersweet. I used to beg my mother to bring you to stay with us. I told her you were my best friend, the only person who did not treat me like a title. When she finally agreed, I thought it was because I had been persuasive. I did not know that she was dying, Eleanor finished softly, that she wanted to see you happy one last time, and that bringing me here was her way of giving you a gift I did not understand until it was nearly too late. Adrian's hand moved across the bench between them, not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin. Eleanor, I need to tell you something about the day you arrived, 6 months ago. Eleanor looked at him, waiting. I was in the stables when I heard your voice in the courtyard, he said. I had not seen you in 3 years, not since that day by the river when you pushed me away and refused to explain why. I was angry with you still, I thought, hurt by your rejection. But then I heard you laugh at something the coachman said, and he paused, his jaw working. I had to sit down. My knees would not hold me. That is when I knew that 3 years had changed nothing, that I was still completely, irrevocably yours. Then why did you treat me with such coldness? Eleanor asked. Those first weeks you barely spoke to me. Because I was trying to protect myself, Adrian admitted. I thought if I kept my distance, if I reminded myself you were just the governess, I could control what I felt. But it was torture, Eleanor. Seeing you every day, watching you move through my house, hearing your voice echo through the halls, it was exquisite torture. I thought you hated me, Eleanor whispered. I thought you had forgotten what we were to each other. I could never forget. Adrian's hand finally closed over hers, a breach of the propriety he had maintained so carefully. And I could never hate you, even when I accused you of theft, even when I said those terrible things. Beneath the anger was love, twisted and confused, but love nonetheless. Eleanor turned her hand over in his, their fingers intertwining. It was such a simple touch, yet it sent heat racing through her body. Adrian, I need to tell you something, too, about the letter. She felt him tense beside her. What about it? I did not just bury it to hide the truth, she said. I buried it because I was trying to kill it, to make it cease to exist. I stood there in the garden at midnight with the moon overhead, and I prayed that the earth would swallow that letter and all the pain it contained. I wanted to unmake the truth. But truth cannot be unmade, Adrian said quietly. No, but it can be reinterpreted. Eleanor looked at him, her heart in her throat. Your mother's letter said that we shared a father, but it also said something else, something I have thought about constantly these past months. It said, I pray that Adrian and Eleanor will find the strength to forgive each other for what they cannot change. I always assumed she meant we should forgive each other for being connected by blood. But what if, she paused, gathering courage, what if she meant we should forgive each other for being human, for wanting what we want, for loving despite every reason not to? Adrian stared at her, something like hope kindling in his eyes. Do you mean... I mean that I have prayed every night for a month, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. I have begged God for guidance, for a sign, for anything that would tell me the right path. And the only answer I have received is the peace I feel when I am with you, the sense of rightness even in the midst of wrongness. Adrian, I do not know if what we feel is blessed or cursed, but I know that it is real, and I know that I cannot walk away from it. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. Are you saying... I am saying, yes, Eleanor whispered. Yes to courting. Yes to marriage. Yes, to building a life together, despite every law of blood and propriety that would forbid it. I am saying yes because I love you, and because I have to believe, that love this strong cannot be wholly wrong. For a moment, Adrian simply stared at her, as if afraid that speaking would shatter the moment. Then he brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles, her palm, the delicate skin of her wrist where her pulse hammered. "Eleanor," he breathed, "my Eleanor." "Not yet," she said, though she did not pull away. "We must do this properly. An engagement, a wedding, all the traditions. I will not have our union questioned by anyone, not even in whispers." "Then you will have the grandest wedding London has ever seen," Adrian promised. "I will court you with such devotion that the entire ton will be convinced I am the most fortunate man alive." "Which I am." Eleanor laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy and lingering fear. "They will say I have bewitched you, a governess capturing a duke. Let them say what they wish." Adrian's eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "The truth is far more miraculous than any story they could invent." But the truth, as it so often did, refused to stay buried. It came in the form of a visitor 3 weeks into their engagement, an elderly woman who arrived without warning, demanding to see the Duke. Eleanor was in the drawing room when the housekeeper announced her, and something about the name, Mrs. Catherine Wright, sent ice through her veins. "I know that name," Eleanor said to Adrian, who had joined her moments later. "My mother mentioned her once. She paled. She was my mother's sister, my aunt." Adrian's face went carefully blank. "Did you know you had an aunt living?" "I thought she had died." Eleanor's hands twisted together in her lap. "Mother said she had cut all ties with the family after—" She stopped. "After the scandal of Eleanor's birth." "I will see her alone first," Adrian said. "If she has come to make trouble—" "No," Eleanor stood, her chin lifting with a courage she did not feel. "If she has come about me, then I should be present. We have nothing to hide." It was a lie, of course. They had everything to hide. But Eleanor was tired of hiding, tired of running, and if this woman had come to drag their secret into the light, then perhaps it was meant to be. Mrs. Catherine Wright was a thin, sharp-featured woman in her 60s, dressed in mourning black. She stood in the entrance hall with the rigid posture of someone prepared for battle, and when her eyes landed on Eleanor, they widened with something that might have been recognition or might have been horror. "So it is true," the woman said. "You are Eleanor, my sister's child." "I am," Eleanor said, keeping her voice steady. "Though I confess I am surprised to see you. I was told you wanted nothing to do with us." "I wanted nothing to do with your mother's choices," Mrs. Wright said sharply. "She threw away her respectability for a married man, bore his bastard child, and died in poverty because of it. I told her she was a fool, and I stand by that assessment." Adrian stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. "You will speak with respect in my house, madam, or you will leave." Mrs. Wright's gaze snapped to him, and Eleanor saw calculation in her eyes. The Duke of Thornwood. "How convenient that my niece has found her way into your household. Tell me, Your Grace, do you know who her father was?" The question hung in the air like an axe waiting to fall. "I know everything about Miss Ashford's parentage," Adrian said coolly, "and I fail to see how it is any concern of yours." "It is my concern because I have just learned that you intend to marry her." Mrs. Wright's voice rose. "Yes, the gossip has reached even my remote corner of Yorkshire. The Duke of Thornwood engaged to his governess? It is the talk of the county. And when I heard the name Eleanor Ashford, I knew I had to come." "To offer your congratulations?" Adrian asked with icy politeness. To prevent a disaster. Mrs. Wright pulled a letter from her reticule, yellowed with age. This is a letter my sister wrote to me shortly before her death. In it, she names the father of her child. She names him because she wanted me to know that Eleanor was not some random indiscretion, but the daughter of a great man. A man who would have married her, she claimed, if he had been free. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. What are you saying? I am saying that I know who your father was, Mrs. Wright said, her eyes boring into Eleanor's. And I know that he was the late Duke of Thornwood, which makes you, my dear niece, half-sister to the man you intend to marry. The words fell like hammer blows. Adrian's hand found Eleanor's, gripping it so tightly it hurt. That is a serious accusation, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Do you have proof? I have my sister's word, Mrs. Wright said, and I have this. She held up the letter. In it, she describes the Duke in such specific detail that there can be no doubt. His love of poetry, his scar from a childhood fall, his habit of humming while he worked. She loved him, you see, even though he abandoned her. He did not know about me, Eleanor said, the words tumbling out. Your sister never told him she was with child. He never knew. Mrs. Wright's expression softened slightly. Perhaps not, but that does not change what you are, and it does not change the fact that this marriage cannot be allowed to proceed. Why? The word burst from Eleanor like a cry. Why have you come here? Why now, after all these years of silence? Because I failed my sister, Mrs. Wright said, and for the first time, Eleanor heard pain beneath the harsh words. I let her die alone and afraid because I was more concerned with my own reputation than her welfare. I will not compound that sin by allowing her daughter to damn herself through an unholy union with her own brother. We are not brother and sister, Adrian said fiercely. Not in any way that matters. We were not raised together. We did not know of our connection until recently. What we feel for each other has nothing to do with blood and everything to do with love. Mrs. Wright's laugh was bitter. Love is not enough, Your Grace. The Church will not sanction this marriage if the truth is known. Society will not tolerate it. And your children, if you are foolish enough to have them, will be— She stopped, her face twisting with distaste. Will be what? Eleanor demanded. Cursed? Deformed? Is that what you came here to say? That any child born of our love would be monstrous? I came here to save you from making the greatest mistake of your life, Mrs. Wright said. Eleanor, you are young. You can still make a respectable match, live a normal life. But if you go through with this marriage, if the truth ever comes to light, you will be ruined beyond redemption. Both of you will be. Eleanor looked at Adrian and saw her own desperation reflected in his face. They had been so careful, had destroyed the Duchess's letter, had convinced themselves that without evidence the truth could not harm them. But here was the evidence, clutched in the hands of a bitter woman who saw their love as sin incarnate. What do you want? Adrian asked flatly. You did not come here merely to warn us. You want something. Mrs. Wright's mouth thinned. I want you to end this engagement, publicly. I want Eleanor to leave this house and accept a position I have arranged for her in Scotland, far from here, far from temptation. And in exchange, I will burn this letter and never speak of its contents again. No. The word came from Eleanor, sharp and certain. I will not be bartered away like some shameful secret. You are a shameful secret. Mrs. Wright said bluntly. "And if you will not protect yourself, then I must do it for you." "By blackmail?" Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. "You would threaten us into compliance?" "I would save you from yourselves," Mrs. Wright insisted. "Your Grace, think of your position. Think of the Thornwood name. If this truth emerges, and it will emerge eventually, you will lose everything. Your title cannot be taken, but your reputation will be destroyed. Your ability to move in society, to serve your queen, to do any good in this world, all of it will be ash." "Then let it burn," Adrian said, and Eleanor's heart stuttered at the fierce conviction in his voice. "I have lived my entire life in service to duty and reputation. I have been the perfect duke, the model of propriety, and it has brought me nothing but emptiness. Eleanor is the only thing, the only person who has ever made me feel truly alive, and I will not give her up, not for you, not for society, not for God himself." Mrs. Wright's face hardened. "Then you are both fools, and you deserve the destruction that awaits you. But I will not be party to it." She turned toward the door. "I will give you 3 days to reconsider. If you have not ended this engagement by then, I will take this letter to the Archbishop himself, and I will see to it that every drawing room in London knows the truth." "Wait," Eleanor said. Mrs. Wright paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Why do you care so much? You said yourself that you failed my mother."
Why not simply let us make our own mistakes? For a long moment, Mrs. Wright was silent. Then she said quietly, "Because I see my sister in you. The same stubbornness, the same willingness to throw away everything for love. And I know how that story ends. In poverty, in shame, in death before your time. I could not save Catherine, but perhaps I can save you." "By forcing me into exile?" Eleanor shook her head. "That is not salvation. That is prison." "It is survival," Mrs. Wright said, "which is more than my sister achieved. 3 days, Your Grace. I will return for your answer." And with that, she swept from the house, leaving behind her ultimatum like a curse. In the terrible silence that followed, Eleanor and Adrian stood frozen, still holding hands like children afraid of the dark. "She will do it," Eleanor whispered. "She will expose us." "Let her." Adrian pulled her close, and Eleanor went, burying her face against his chest. "Eleanor, I meant what I said. I will not give you up. Even if it costs you everything? You are everything." His hand cradled the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. "Without you, titles and reputation are meaningless. I would rather be ruined with you than respectable without you." Eleanor pulled back, looking up at him through tears. "You say that now, but when the scandal breaks, when the whispers follow you everywhere, when you see the disgust in people's eyes—" "Then I will endure it," Adrian said, "and so will you, because we will be together, and that will make it bearable." "You do not know what you are asking," Eleanor's voice broke. "To be shunned by society, to have our children, if we have children, branded as the product of sin, to live always under a cloud of shame." "I know exactly what I am asking." Adrian's thumb brushed away her tears. "And I am asking it anyway, because 3 days of happiness with you is worth a lifetime of misery without you." "And if we must face scandal, if we must endure judgment, then we will face it together. Eleanor, do you truly believe that what we feel is wrong? In your heart of hearts, do you believe we are committing a sin? Eleanor closed her eyes, searching her soul for the answer. She thought of the joy she felt in his presence, the peace that settled over her when they talked late into the night. She thought of how he looked at her, not with lust or possession, but with reverence, as if she were something precious and rare. She thought of how her heart had chosen him long before she knew the truth of their blood, how her soul had recognized his as its match. "No," she whispered, "I do not believe we are wrong. I believe the world is wrong for condemning something so pure, so true. But that does not change what we will face if your aunt carries out her threat." "Then we will face it," Adrian said, "together." But even as he said it, Eleanor saw the shadow of doubt cross his face, and she knew he was thinking of everything he would lose. His position in Parliament, his influence at court, the respect of his peers, the ability to protect the estate and the people who depended on him. All of it risked for love. All of it potentially destroyed by the letter in a bitter woman's hands. "There is another option," Eleanor said slowly. Adrian pulled back, looking at her warily. "I could leave. I could accept the position your aunt has arranged, and you could marry someone suitable, have the life you were meant to have." "Without you?" Adrian's voice was flat. "You are suggesting I live without you." "I am suggesting we both survive," Eleanor said. "Adrian, if the scandal breaks, you lose more than reputation. You lose the ability to do good in the world. Think of the causes you champion in Parliament, the reforms you fight for, the people whose lives you improve. Would you throw all of that away? For you?" "Yes." He said it without hesitation. "Eleanor, those causes will find other champions, but I will never find another you. There is only one person in all the world who sees me not as the Duke, but as Adrian. Only one person whose love feels like coming home. I have told you I will not give you up, and I meant it."
"Even if it destroys you?"
"Even then."
Eleanor felt her resolve crumbling. How could she argue with such devotion? How could she walk away when every fiber of her being longed to stay? 3 days, she said. Your aunt gave us 3 days. Let us use them wisely. Perhaps we can find another way.
"What other way is there?" Adrian asked. "She has evidence. She has the power to ruin us. Unless—" he paused, something dark flickering in his eyes. "Unless we remove her ability to do so." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Adrian, no, whatever you are thinking." "I am thinking that a letter can be stolen as easily as a brooch can be planted," Adrian said. "I am thinking that Mrs. Catherine Wright is an elderly woman staying alone at an inn, and that accidents happen." "Stop!" Eleanor gripped his arms, forcing him to look at her. "Stop! I will not have you become a villain in this story. I will not have you compromise your soul to save our future. And I will not have you sacrificed to spare mine," Adrian shot back. "Eleanor, if we do nothing, we lose everything. If your aunt exposes us, we are ruined regardless. At least this way. This way, we become what she accuses us of being. Eleanor, sinners, criminals, people who put their own desires above all else. No, Adrian, if we are to be together, we must find a way that does not require us to become monsters." Adrian's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Then what do you propose?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then, slowly, an idea began to form. Risky, perhaps even futile, but better than the alternatives. "We tell the truth," she said. Adrian stared at her. "What? Not the whole truth," Eleanor clarified. "But enough of it. We tell your aunt, and anyone else who will listen, that yes, we share a father. But we frame it as a tragedy, not a scandal. We acknowledge the blood connection, but we argue that it does not define us. We were raised apart, knew nothing of our kinship until recently, and fell in love in innocence. We appeal not to law, but to mercy. You think people will show mercy? Adrian sounded skeptical. I think some will, Eleanor said. Not everyone, perhaps, but enough. We know several progressive members of the clergy, scholars who believe that love matters more than law. And we have allies, Lady Pemberton, for one, your mother's friends, people who knew us both and might be willing to support us. It is a gamble, Adrian said. Everything worth having requires a gamble, Eleanor replied. But at least this way, we control the narrative. We tell our story before your aunt can twist it into something ugly. We speak from the heart, openly and honestly, and we let society make its judgment. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to nod. It is mad. It is possibly the most foolish thing I have ever contemplated. But Eleanor, a smile ghosted across his lips. It is also exactly the kind of bold, beautiful plan I would expect from you. Then you will do it? You will stand with me and face whatever comes? I will stand with you, Adrian said, until the end of the world and beyond. They began their campaign the next morning. First, they called on Lady Pemberton, who had been the Duchess's dearest friend and was known throughout the county as a woman of uncommon wisdom and compassion. Eleanor told her everything. The letter, the connection, the love that had grown between them despite every reason it should not. Lady Pemberton listened in silence, her face unreadable. When Eleanor finished, the elderly woman sat for a long moment, staring into the fire in her drawing room. I am asking you to sanction what the church would call incest, she said finally. I am asking you to see us as people, Eleanor replied, not as a scandal, but as two souls who found each other despite impossible odds. Lady Pemberton looked at her, then at Adrian. The Duchess knew, did she not? She knew, Adrian confirmed, and she made Eleanor promise to keep us apart. Lady Pemberton tapped her fingers on the arm of her chair. Catherine always was more concerned with propriety than happiness. I loved her dearly, but she could be rigid in her thinking. She paused. Tell me, Eleanor, if you could wave a hand and make this connection disappear, would you? No, she said finally, because knowing we share blood has made me understand Adrian in a way I might not have otherwise. It has given me compassion for his father, who made terrible choices but was not wholly evil. It has shown me that family is more complex than we like to believe, and that love can bloom even in unlikely soil. Lady Pemberton's lips curved in a small smile. A wise answer. She turned to Adrian. And you, Your Grace, if you could choose to forget Eleanor, to live your life as it was meant to be lived, would you? I would choose Eleanor, Adrian said without hesitation. Every time, in every life, I would choose her. Lady Pemberton studied them both, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Then she sighed. I will help you, she said, and Eleanor felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. But not because I think what you are doing is right. I am not certain it is. I will help you because I believe the human heart is the most complex creation in all of God's kingdom, and I do not presume to judge its workings. Thank you, Eleanor whispered. Do not thank me yet, Lady Pemberton warned. The scandal will be vicious. People will say terrible things. You will lose friends, invitations, standing. Are you truly prepared for that? We are, Adrian said, and Eleanor nodded. Then we must move quickly, Lady Pemberton said, before Mrs. Wright can act. I know several influential clergy members who might be sympathetic, men who believe that love is a manifestation of the divine, regardless of its form. We will invite them to dinner, explain your situation, and ask for their support. "And if they refuse?" Eleanor asked. "Then we try someone else," Lady Pemberton said briskly. "This is a war for your future, my dear. We must fight it on every front." The dinner took place 2 nights later, a carefully orchestrated gathering that included Bishop Thornhill, a liberal-minded clergyman known for his progressive views, Dr. Marcus Webb, a philosopher who had written extensively on the nature of love, and Professor Helena Ashworth, a distant relative of Eleanor's who taught ethics at Cambridge. Eleanor's hands shook as she took her seat at the table. Adrian sat beside her, his presence a steady anchor, but she could feel the weight of judgment in the room. These people would decide their fate. Lady Pemberton began with a simple introduction, explaining that Eleanor and Adrian had a matter of great delicacy to discuss. Then Adrian took over, his voice steady but impassioned. He told them about the letter, about the shared blood, about the love that had existed before knowledge, and the impossible choice they now faced. "We come before you not seeking absolution," Adrian said. "We know that many would consider our union a sin, but we ask you to consider this. If God creates all love, does He not also create the love we feel for each other? And if that love brings no harm, causes no suffering, exists only to uplift and sustain, is it truly wrong? Or is it simply misunderstood?" Professor Ashworth spoke first. "The arguments against consanguineous marriage are primarily practical," she said.
The risk of genetic defects in offspring, the potential for unequal power dynamics within families. But in your case, you were not raised as siblings. You did not know of your connection. The typical concerns do not apply. "And yet, the law forbids it," Bishop Thornhill said. "The Church forbids it. For good reason. Such unions disrupt the natural order." "But what is the natural order?" Dr. Webb interjected. "Humans have loved across kinship lines throughout history. Many cultures permit marriages that our society forbids. Are we so certain our definitions are the only correct ones?" The debate raged for hours. Eleanor and Adrian sat in silence, listening as their fate was dissected, analyzed, philosophized. Some arguments were compassionate, others were harsh. But through it all, Eleanor felt a strange sense of peace. This was better than hiding, better than shame. Even if they were ultimately condemned, at least they were being seen, truly seen, for who they were. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, Bishop Thornhill raised his hand for silence. "I cannot offer you the Church's blessing," he said to Adrian and Eleanor. "That would require me to contradict centuries of doctrine. But," he paused, "I can offer you something else. My silence, my refusal to condemn, and perhaps, in time, my private support. It was not everything, but it was enough." One by one, the others echoed his sentiment. They could not publicly endorse the marriage, but neither would they oppose it. They would allow Eleanor and Adrian to make their own choice, to face their own consequences, without adding to the weight of judgment. "Thank you," Eleanor said, when they were finally alone again with Lady Pemberton. "Thank you for giving us a chance." "Do not think this means you are safe," Lady Pemberton warned. "Mrs. Wright will not be swayed by philosophical arguments. When she acts, and she will act, you must be prepared for a firestorm." "We will be," Adrian said. But Eleanor heard the uncertainty beneath his words, and she felt it echoed in her own heart. The 3 days passed too quickly. On the morning of the deadline, Mrs. Wright returned to Thornwood Manor, her face set in grim determination. "Well," she said, when she was shown into the drawing room where Eleanor and Adrian waited, "have you come to your senses?" "We have," Adrian said. "We have decided to go forward with the marriage, and we are prepared to face whatever consequences follow." Mrs. Wright's face flushed with anger.
Then you are fools, both of you, and I wash my hands of it. She pulled the yellowed letter from her reticule. I will send this to the Archbishop this very afternoon. By week's end, all of London will know what you are. Then all of London will know that we loved each other enough to risk everything, Eleanor said quietly, and perhaps some will see courage in that rather than sin. Mrs. Wright stared at her, and for a moment Eleanor thought she saw something soften in the older woman's expression. But then it hardened again, and Mrs. Wright shook her head. "You are so much like your mother," she said, "stubborn to the point of self-destruction. I hope you do not share her fate." "I hope I do," Eleanor said. "My mother loved deeply, lived honestly, and died without regret. If that is to be my legacy, I will embrace it gladly." Mrs. Wright's mouth tightened. Without another word, she turned and left. Adrian and Eleanor stood together in the silence that followed, hands clasped, hearts beating in tandem. "It is done," Adrian said. "No turning back now." "No turning back," Eleanor agreed. And despite the fear curling in her stomach, she felt a strange exhilaration. They had chosen. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The scandal broke like a summer storm, sudden, violent, all-consuming. Within days of Mrs. Wright sending her letter to the Archbishop, the rumors began to spread. Whispers in drawing rooms. Shocked gasps behind fans. The Duke of Thornwood, engaged to his own half-sister. It was a delicious scandal, the kind that society devoured with gleeful horror. The invitations stopped coming. Friends became strangers. Even the servants grew uncertain, their eyes sliding away when Eleanor passed. But there were allies, too. Lady Pemberton stood firm, hosting a tea where she openly supported Eleanor and Adrian's right to choose their own path. Bishop Thornhill published an essay on the complexity of love and the limits of human judgment. Professor Ashworth gave a lecture at Cambridge arguing for a more nuanced understanding of kinship. It was not enough to silence the scandal, but it was enough to create doubt, to make people question whether condemnation was truly warranted. Adrian threw himself into the battle with fierce determination. He gave interviews to sympathetic journalists, framing their story as a tragedy of fate rather than a choice of sin. He called in favors from influential friends, persuading them to at least withhold judgment. And Eleanor discovered a strength she had not known she possessed. She walked through the disapproving stares with her head high. She responded to cruel comments with grace. She refused to be ashamed. "Let them talk," she told Adrian one evening as they stood together on the terrace looking out over the moonlit gardens. "Let them judge. We know the truth of what we are, and that is enough." "Is it?" Adrian's arm tightened around her waist. "Eleanor, I see how you flinch when you hear the whispers. I know this is harder than you pretend." "Of course it is hard," Eleanor admitted, "but it would be harder to live without you. And I am tired of letting fear make my choices for me." Adrian turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "I love you," he said. "I will always love you. And I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of your courage." "You already are," Eleanor whispered. And then, for the first time since they had discovered the truth of their connection, she kissed him, not with the desperation of stolen moments, but with the certainty of chosen commitment. The scandal continued to rage around them, but in that moment, they were untouchable. The wedding took place 3 months later, in the small chapel on the Thornwood estate rather than in London. It was not the grand society affair Adrian had once promised her, but it was beautiful in its intimacy. Just Lady Pemberton, Bishop Thornhill, a handful of loyal friends, and the servants who had chosen to stay despite the scandal. Eleanor wore a simple white gown, no veil. She wanted to face Adrian with nothing between them, no barriers, no pretense. When she walked down the aisle toward him, she saw tears in his eyes and her own vision blurred. Bishop Thornhill performed the ceremony with quiet dignity. He spoke of love as a force that transcends human understanding, of the courage required to follow one's heart despite the censure of the world. He did not mention sin or scandal. He spoke only of commitment, of trust, of two souls choosing each other despite impossible odds. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a long, weighted silence. Eleanor held her breath, half expecting Mrs. Wright to materialize with fresh accusations. But no one spoke. Then, by the power vested in me, Bishop Thornhill said, and trusting in the grace of a God who understands what we cannot, I pronounce you husband and wife. Adrian kissed her then, and Eleanor tasted salt. His tears or hers, she could not tell. It did not matter. They were married. Against all odds, against all laws of propriety and blood, they were married. The celebration afterward was small but joyous. Lady Pemberton gave a toast that made Eleanor cry again, speaking of love's ability to redeem even the most complicated circumstances. Dr. Webb recited poetry.
Professor Ashworth laughed and drank too much wine and declared them the bravest people she had ever known. As the sun set, Adrian took Eleanor's hand and led her to the gardens, to the white roses where she had once buried his mother's letter. "I had this made for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple gold, engraved with words in Latin. "Amor vincit omnia," Eleanor read. "Love conquers all." "It does," Adrian said, slipping the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. "Against blood, against law, against the judgment of the world, love conquers all. We are proof of that." Eleanor looked up at him, this man who had risked everything for her, and felt her heart overflow. "What happens now?" she asked. "The scandal will not disappear simply because we are wed." "No," Adrian agreed, "but we will face it together. And perhaps, in time, we will prove that love like ours, love that chooses rather than assumes, that fights rather than surrenders, is not a sin to be condemned, but a miracle to be celebrated." "A miracle," Eleanor repeated softly. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him, there beneath the roses, where so much pain had been buried, and felt only joy. The years that followed were not easy. The scandal never fully faded. There were always whispers, always those who looked at them with disapproval or disgust. But slowly, grudgingly, society began to make room for them again. Adrian's work in Parliament became more respected, not less. His willingness to risk everything for love was seen by some as evidence of his integrity, a man who lived by his convictions rather than merely speaking them. Eleanor, meanwhile, became known as a patron of the arts and education, using her position to help other young women who found themselves on the margins of society. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, all healthy, all beautiful.
And if there were cruel whispers about the children's parentage, Eleanor and Adrian chose not to hear them. Their family was built on love, not judgment, and that was all that mattered. On their 10th anniversary, Adrian found Eleanor in the library, surrounded by books as always. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you have regrets?" he asked softly. "Looking back on everything we have faced, do you wish we had made different choices?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thinking of the lost friendships, the doors that had closed, the constant weight of scandal that still followed them in certain circles. Then she thought of her children's laughter, of mornings waking up beside the man she loved, of the life they had built together despite every obstacle. "No," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "I would choose you again. Every time, I would choose you." Adrian smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that still made her breath catch. "Even knowing what it would cost?" "Especially knowing what it would cost," Eleanor said, "because the cost of losing you would have been so much greater." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of 10 years of love that had only deepened with time. And Eleanor thought of that rainy night when he had ridden back to save her, of the choice they had made in the face of impossible odds, and she knew with absolute certainty that it had been the right one. Love had conquered all, not easily, not simply, but completely. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Mrs. Catherine Wright never spoke to them again after the wedding, but 5 years later, when she died, her solicitor delivered a letter to Eleanor, written shortly before Mrs. Wright's passing. "My dear niece, I was wrong. It has taken me too long to admit it, but I was wrong. I let fear and propriety guide my actions when I should have been guided by compassion. I watched you and the Duke these past years, from a distance, for I was too stubborn to reach out, and I have seen what I refused to see before. You are happy. You are good. You are building a life of meaning and love. Your mother would be proud of you. I know I failed her in life, but perhaps this admission can be my final act of honoring her memory. Love, I have learned, is not always neat and simple. Sometimes it is messy and complicated and defies easy categorization, but that does not make it any less sacred. I will not ask for your forgiveness, for I do not deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see you now, truly see you, and what I see is not sin, but courage. Live well, Eleanor. Love well, and do not let the judgment of others, including mine, dim the light you have found together. Your aunt, Catherine Wright. Eleanor read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Then she took it to Adrian, and they read it together by the fire. "She understood in the end," Adrian said softly. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "She understood that love is not about blood or law or propriety. It is about choosing each other every day, despite everything." Adrian pulled her close, and Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They had chosen each other, and that choice had been everything. The end.